Step away from the vehicle, pal. Keep your hands where I can see them.
Officer, look, this is my car. I am a judge, and you are making a serious mistake.
A judge, yeah, right. You don't look like you belong in this neighborhood.
You have no probable cause. Touch me again, and this ends your career.
Stop resisting. Put your hands behind your back.
I am not resisting.
On this particular Tuesday, trouble was exactly what he found, but not the kind he was looking for. The man he had just slammed against the side of the luxury SUV was not a car thief. He was not a shoplifter. He was the Honorable Elias Thorne, the chief judge of the family court, a man who had presided over the city's most difficult cases for 22 years. Thorne was 58 years old, a pillar of the legal community, a man who had spent 3 decades building a reputation for fairness, intellect, and unshakable integrity. He was wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Officer Kalen's first car. He had just dropped his granddaughter's stroller into his trunk after dropping the child off with her parents, and he was heading to the courthouse to hear a motion on a high-profile custody case. But right now, none of that mattered. Right now, to Officer Kalen Elias Thorne was just a black man with a nice car in a neighborhood where Kalen didn't think he belonged. Before we get into the details of how this interaction destroyed a career and cost the city millions, where are you watching from? If you believe that justice should be blind, but law enforcement often isn't, hit that subscribe button. We need to shine a light on these stories because silence only protects the system, not the citizens. Officer Kalen had a history that should have been a warning sign to anyone paying attention. In his 6 years with the department, he had accumulated 9 complaints. Most were for discourtesy or unnecessary roughness. He was the type of officer who escalated simple traffic stops into interrogations. He had been transferred twice, moving from precinct to precinct. His supervisors noting his high activity, but largely ignoring his lack of discretion. He was what the department called a hard charger, a euphemism for an officer who was aggressive but produced arrest numbers. He believed that respect was something you demanded with a badge, not something you earned with conduct. Elias Thorne, on the other hand, was a man who lived by a code of absolute discipline. He had grown up in a time when a black man in the legal profession had to be twice as good to get half the credit. He had graduated top of his class from Georgetown Law, worked as a prosecutor for 10 years, and then ascended to the bench. He was known as the Hammer in family court, not because he was cruel, but because he was decisive. He didn't tolerate nonsense in his courtroom, and he certainly didn't tolerate foolishness in his personal life. He drove a 2024 Audi Q7 because he had earned it. He lived in the Silver Creek district because he could afford it. And on this bright, clear Tuesday morning, he was simply a grandfather doing a favor for his daughter, utterly unaware that his mere presence was about to trigger a chain reaction that would expose the rot in the local precinct. The Silver Creek district was the jewel of the city. It was an area of manicured lawns, high-end boutiques, and expensive cars. It was the kind of place where the police patrol was constant not to fight crime, but to maintain an image of safety for the wealthy taxpayers. Officer Kalen was on a proactive patrol, cruising slowly down Highland Avenue, scanning the sidewalks. It was 10:15 a.m. The morning rush was over. The streets were relatively quiet, save for a few shoppers and business people. Kalen's eyes were scanning for anything that disrupted the picture. He spotted the black Audi Q7 parked near a high-end baby boutique. It was a nice car, too. Nice. And then he saw the man. Elias Thorne was standing at the rear of the vehicle, wrestling with the frame of a silver imported stroller. It was a complicated piece of equipment, the kind with hydraulic folds and aerospace-grade aluminum. Thorne was frowning, trying to get the wheels to collapse so it would fit in the trunk. To you or me, this looked like a grandfather struggling with modern baby technology. But to Officer Kalen, watching from 50 yards away, the narrative was already written. He saw a black man in a high-end neighborhood struggling to load expensive merchandise into a luxury vehicle. In Kalen's mind, the pieces clicked together with a sickening prejudice. The car was probably stolen, or at the very least didn't belong to him. The stroller was likely snatched from the boutique just a few yards away. Why else would he be struggling with it? If it was his, he'd know how to fold it. He was moving too fast, looking around. Actually, Thorne was looking for the release button, which Kalen interpreted as checking for witnesses. Kalen didn't run the license plate. If he had, he would have seen the vehicle was registered to Elias A. Thorne with a designation for judicial officer. He didn't call dispatch to check for reported thefts. He simply decided that a crime was in progress. The bias wasn't a bug in his operating system. It was the feature. He pulled his cruiser up, aggressively blocking the Audi from behind, effectively trapping the vehicle. He didn't turn on his lights, just the quick whoop-whoop of the siren to startle the suspect. Thorne paused, looking up from the stroller. He saw the police car blocking him. He didn't panic. He didn't run. He simply straightened his suit jacket, adjusted his glasses, and waited. He assumed the officer needed to get by or was answering a call nearby. He had no idea he was the target. This calmness, this lack of fear irritated Kalen immediately. In his experience, people with guilty consciences acted nervous. Thorne's composure read as arrogance to the young officer. Kalen put the cruiser in park, unbuckled his seatbelt, and stepped out. He didn't put his cap on. He rested his hand on his belt near his holster, a posture of dominance. He walked quickly, closing the distance, already deciding that he wasn't going to take any excuses. "Is this your vehicle?" Kalen barked the question before he even reached the back bumper. There was no, "Good morning," no, "Can I help you?" Just an accusation wrapped in a question. Thorne looked at the officer over the rim of his glasses. He had cross-examined murderers and dismantled corrupt CEOs in his courtroom. He was not intimidated by a 29-year-old patrolman with a bad attitude. "Good morning, officer." Thorne said, his voice a deep, resonant baritone that carried the weight of authority. "Yes, this is my vehicle. Is there a problem?" "You seem to be having a lot of trouble with that equipment," Kalen said, stepping closer, invading Thorne's personal space. He looked at the stroller, then back at Thorne. "You got a receipt for that?" Thorne blinked. The question was absurd. "A receipt, officer. This is my granddaughter's stroller. I am loading it into my car. I don't carry the receipt for a 2-year-old purchase in my pocket. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to get to work." "I didn't say you could go anywhere," Kalen snapped, moving to block Thorne's path to the driver's door. "We've had a lot of grab-and-run thefts in this area, high-end merchandise, and that looks like a brand-new car. You got ID on you." Thorne sighed a long, weary exhalation. He recognized what this was. He had seen it in the cases that came across his desk. He had heard about it from colleagues, but he had insulated himself with success and status, thinking he was immune. "Officer, my name is Elias Thorne. My identification is in my front jacket pocket. I'm going to reach for it slowly." "Don't reach for anything," Kalen shouted, his hand dropping to the grip of his service weapon. "I said don't reach. Keep your hands where I can see them." "I am trying to comply with your request for identification," Thorne said, his voice hardening. The judicial steel was starting to show. "You asked for ID. I am telling you where it is. I am a judge of the family court. If you run the plates on this vehicle, you will see that." "A judge, right?" Kalen scoffed. He didn't believe it for a second. He saw the expensive suit and assumed it was part of the con. "And I'm the police commissioner. Step away from the car now." "I am not stepping away from my property," Thorne said, standing his ground. "I have done nothing wrong. I am not being detained unless you can articulate a reasonable suspicion that a crime has been committed. Can you do that, officer?" That was the breaking point. Kalen hated jailhouse lawyers, people who used legal terms to try and confuse him. He felt his authority slipping. He felt the eyes of people on the sidewalk. He needed to reassert control. He needed to win. "I told you to step away." Kalen lunged forward, grabbing Thorne by the shoulder. "Do not touch me," Thorne said, his voice dropping an octave. "You are making a mistake that will end your career." Kalen didn't listen. He spun the older man around. Thorne, caught off guard by the physical aggression, stumbled slightly. Kalen used the momentum to slam him forward against the side of the Audi. The impact was loud. The metal of the car groaned. The stroller, which was half in and half out of the trunk, was knocked loose and crashed onto the asphalt, rolling into the gutter. "You're under arrest," Kalen yelled, pulling Thorne's arms behind his back. "For what?" Thorne demanded, wincing as his shoulder was wrenched upward. "Loading my own car. This is assault, officer. You are assaulting a member of the judiciary. Resisting arrest and disorderly conduct." Kalen recited the catch-all charges he used whenever someone questioned him. He snapped the handcuffs on. He made them tight, deliberately tight. He wanted this man to feel who was in charge. A small crowd had gathered. A woman in yoga pants had her phone out. A man in a business suit was filming from the sidewalk. "Hey, he wasn't doing anything," the man shouted. "I saw the whole thing. He was just putting the stroller in the car." "Back up," Kalen yelled at the witnesses. "Stay back or you're next." Thorne took a deep breath, fighting the urge to struggle. He knew the law. He knew that any physical resistance now would be used to justify everything the officer had done. He had to be smarter. He had to be the adult in the room. "Officer," Thorne said, his face pressed against the cold window of his own car. "My wallet is in my left interior breast pocket. Inside is my badge. I am asking you for your own sake to check it before you put me in that patrol car." "I'll check it at the station," Kalen said, panting slightly from the exertion. He patted Thorne down aggressively, emptying his pockets. He pulled out the wallet, the keys, the phone. He tossed them onto the hood of the cruiser without looking at them. He didn't want to see the ID. He didn't want to be wrong. He wanted to process the arrest and justify his actions. "You are violating my Fourth Amendment rights," Thorne stated clearly, speaking loud enough for the witnesses to hear. "You have no probable cause. You have no warrant. This is a false arrest, and everyone here is a witness." "Shut up," Kalen hissed. He grabbed Thorne by the arm and marched him towards the back of the patrol car. He shoved the judge's head down the classic humiliating tactic and forced him into the cramped plastic back seat. Kalen slammed the door. He felt a rush of power. He had taken down a big guy, a guy who thought he was better than the police. He walked back to the Audi, grabbed the expensive stroller from the ground, and threw it haphazardly onto the sidewalk, leaving it there. He wouldn't even do the courtesy of putting it in the car. He got into the driver's seat of his cruiser, ignoring the growing crowd of people filming him. Inside the cage, Elias Thorne adjusted his position. The handcuffs were cutting into his wrists. His shoulder throbbed where he had hit the car, but his mind was razor sharp. He was no longer a grandfather. He was a prosecutor again. He was building his case. He noted the time on the dashboard clock, 10:22 a.m. He noted the officer's name tag, Kalen. He noted the lack of Miranda warnings. The drive to the precinct was short, maybe 10 minutes. For Officer Kalen, it was a victory lap. He was already rehearsing his report in his head. Suspect was elusive, refused to provide ownership documentation, became belligerent, resisted detention. He would charge him with everything he could. For Judge Thorne, the drive was a funeral procession for the officer's future. He sat in silence, staring at the back of Kalen's head. He didn't say another word. He didn't need to. He knew exactly who was waiting at the precinct. He knew the desk sergeant Patrick O'Malley. They played poker together once a month. He knew the captain. He knew the district attorney. Kalen hummed along to the radio, tapping the steering wheel. "You know," he said, looking at Thorne in the rearview mirror, "if you people just learned to cooperate, things would go a lot smoother. You come into these neighborhoods, think you own the place. You got to learn respect." Thorne didn't respond. He just memorized the sentence. "If you people just learned to cooperate." It was the final nail in the coffin. They pulled into the sallyport of the 12th precinct. The garage door rolled down, shutting out the sunlight. Kalen got out, opened the back door, and hauled Thorne out. "Let's go," Kalen said. "Don't trip." They walked through the heavy steel doors into the booking area. It was a busy morning. Phones were ringing. Officers were typing reports. At the high desk sat Sergeant Patrick O'Malley, a man with white hair and 30 years on the job. He was drinking coffee, reading a shift report. Kalen marched Thorne up to the desk chest, puffed out. "One under for resisting disorderly and suspicion of grand larceny," Kalen announced loudly. "Guy wouldn't identify, fought me at the scene." Sergeant O'Malley didn't look up immediately. "All right." Kalen put his property on the counter. Kalen dumped the wallet, the keys, and the phone onto the counter. Then he pushed Thorne forward. "Here's the suspect," Kalen said. Sergeant O'Malley looked up. The precinct went silent. O'Malley's eyes went wide. He dropped his pen. He stood up so fast his chair rolled backward and hit the wall. "Judge Thorne," O'Malley gasped. Officer Kalen froze. He looked at the sergeant, then at the man in handcuffs. "Judge," Kalen stammered. "Sarge, this guy ain't a judge. He's a—" "Shut your mouth, Kalen," O'Malley roared. The sound echoed off the concrete walls. O'Malley ran around the desk. "My God, Elias!" "Hello, Patrick," Thorne said calmly. "I believe your officer has made a significant error." O'Malley was fumbling for his keys. "Get these cuffs off him now. Kalen, give me the key." Kalen stood there paralyzed. His brain couldn't process the information, the man in the suit, the arrogance. It wasn't arrogance. It was authority. But Sarge, he resisted. "He wouldn't give me the damn key." O'Malley snatched the key from Kalen's belt and unlocked the cuffs himself. Thorne rubbed his wrists. There were deep red indentations in his skin. He adjusted his suit jacket, then reached for his wallet on the counter. He opened it and placed his gold judicial badge on the desk. It clinked loudly. Officer Kalen refused to look at this. Thorne said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "He refused to run my plates. He refused to listen. He told me that my people need to learn respect." O'Malley turned to Kalen. The sergeant's face was purple with rage. "You arrested the chief judge of the family court for loading his own car." I thought it was stolen," Kalen whispered. He looked small now. The warrior cop was gone. He was just a young man who had just realized he had destroyed his own life. "Captain, get the captain down here now," O'Malley shouted to a corporal nearby. Captain Vance appeared within 2 minutes. When he saw Judge Thorne rubbing his wrists and Officer Kalen standing pale and shaking in the corner, he knew exactly what had happened. Judge Thorne, Vance said, extending a hand, then pulling it back when he realized how inappropriate it might seem. I cannot apologize enough. Are you injured? Do you need a medic? I don't want a medic, Captain, Thorne said. I want to file a formal complaint right now. I am not leaving this lobby until it is logged. Of course, Vance said, whatever you need. And I want my granddaughter's stroller retrieved, Thorne said, looking directly at Kalen. Officer Kalen left it on the sidewalk on Highland Avenue. I assume it is still there unless someone has actually stolen it while he was busy arresting a judge. Kalen, the captain said, his voice like ice. Give me your badge and your gun. Captain I. Badge, gun, now. Kalen's hands shook as he unholstered his weapon and placed it on the counter. He unpinned his badge, the symbol of the power he had abused, and laid it next to the gun. Go sit in the conference room, the captain ordered. Do not speak to anyone. Do not touch your phone. You are on administrative suspension pending an immediate investigation. Kalen walked away, his head down. He passed other officers who were staring at him with a mixture of disbelief and disgust. He had violated the cardinal rule, don't mess with the people who signed the warrants. But more than that, he had been exposed. The fallout was swift and brutal. By noon, the video from the bystander had hit social media. Cop arrests innocent black man for loading stroller. It had 50,000 views in an hour. By 2:00 p.m., it was on the national news. But the real story wasn't just the arrest. It was who he had arrested. When the press found out it was Judge Elias Thorne, the city exploded. The mayor gave a press conference at 4 p.m., apologizing to the judge and promising a complete overhaul of police training. Officer Kalen was fired 3 weeks later. The internal investigation was a formality. The dash cam video, the body cam video, which Kalen had turned on late, but still caught the interaction, and the bystander video painted a damning picture of racial profiling and incompetence. Judge Thorne sued the city. He didn't do it for the money, though he won a $4.8 million settlement. He did it to force a consent decree. Part of the settlement required the department to track and analyze all suspicion-based stops. It required officers to articulate specific criminal activity before detaining anyone. It ended the qualified immunity defense for officers in the city who violated clear constitutional rights. 2 years later, Elias Thorne sat in his study. The money from the settlement had gone into a legal defense fund for indigent defendants. He was retired now. He spent his days with his granddaughter. He looked out the window at the rain falling on the street. He thought about that day often. He thought about how quickly his dignity had been stripped away. He thought about the handcuffs. And he thought about Officer Kalen. He didn't hate the young man. He pitied him. Kalen had been a product of a system that taught him to fear and control rather than serve and protect. But mostly, Thorne thought about the men who weren't judges, the men who didn't have gold badges in their pockets, the men who were thrown against cars and handcuffed and hauled away, and who didn't have a Sergeant O'Malley to recognize them at the desk. Who spoke for them? That is the question we are left with. Judge Thorne had the power to fight back. He had the stature to demand justice. But justice shouldn't depend on your job title. It shouldn't depend on the cost of your suit. Officer Kalen's career is over. That is accountability. But until every citizen can load a stroller into a car without fear of being treated like a criminal, have we really achieved justice? What do you think should officers be personally liable for civil rights violations? Does a badge grant authority, or does it require responsibility? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you believe that no one is above the law and no one should be beneath its protection, share this story. Let's keep the conversation going. Until next time.